Hello, everyone. It's Paige Hendricks-Buckner. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Founder Gym, and I am back to introduce you to somebody who, last time I saw speak in person, danced his way to his presentation and then just delivered a beautiful drop the mic presentation about the work that he is doing. He is a former pastor, a founder, and now he's the managing director with the Black Founders Matter Fund. Listen, this man needs no more introduction, but I got to tell you, he's one of my favorite people, and he's going to be bringing you gems and energy. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Marceau Michel, and he's going to talk about the color of money. Marceau, take it away, and I will see you at the end of your presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. All right, let me turn down my Beyonce. I'm so excited to be here. Welcome to my home, and that is my dog Zuli over here, who just decided to join, and so hopefully she doesn't make much of a racket, but she likes to be here for these things too. Thank you so much. My name is Marceau Michel. I am the founder and co-managing director of the Black Founders Matter Venture Fund, and the theme of my discussion today is the color of money. When thinking about the color of money, I had to really kind of break things down, right? And first of all, when we're talking about money, what are we talking about? Let's break that down, money as it's defined and as it functions. I feel like that was the best way to get started with this discussion. Money is a medium of exchange. Everywhere I looked at definitions, it was medium of exchange. For anything widely accepted as payment. Now, usually it said that money was coins and banknotes, like bills, dollar bills, or $20 bills, or $100 bills. But that's not always the case. Money is really anything that's widely accepted as payment. For example, in Romania in the 1980s, while under the communist rule of the Communist Party, Kent cigarettes were widely accepted for payment for all kinds of services. So first, understanding that money can really, anything that's accepted as a widely accepted by an entire community is considered to be money, anything that's used for payment. So now money has three main functions. One, like we said, being a medium of exchange, but also being a unit of account, right? So now when thinking of it as a unit of account, that means a consistent means of measuring the value of things. And just remember, we're gonna talk about value and the importance of value, but now, to give an example of that, for example, you may say, I bought a TV for $200, right? Or I got a pizza for $20. Now, you wouldn't usually say, I got a TV for 10 pizzas. Now, you might have bartered in that way, but that's not a widely accepted exchange for money. And bartering is very different. Now, the third function of money is a store of value, an item that holds value over time. Now, we all know that from our experiences when it comes to losing money in our pockets and in our house. And then we all know the joy of when we find it. When you find that $10 bill in one of your pockets and you're like, this is great. And if you're like me, you think lunch, this is gonna be absolutely wonderful. So when we think of just the functions of money, nothing about color has anything to do with it, because communities of all kinds throughout history have had some medium of exchange when it came to getting services and goods and needs. So money in and of itself doesn't have color. However, money is defined by people and what they do. I want to say that again. Money is defined by people and what they do or don't do. So when we think of the bigger context of money and we think about the color of money, and I run a venture capital fund, and so money is very important to me. And the color of money and how money is used is of keen interest to me. Now, when we think of how venture uses money, we're back to that simple point. Money is defined by people and what they do. So when we think about venture capital in general, what do they do with their money? I'm going to give you one example because this is my line of expertise. And let's look at slide number 1. Please. Are we getting slide 1? Perfect. Will I get to see it? Maybe I don't get to see it. So when we look at money and how it's used, for example, when it comes to Black founders, how venture capital uses money is really the odds of getting funding is like 100 to 1, right? 1% of all of the venture funding ends up going to Black founders, right? And though over the last 10 years, there's been much lip service given to inclusion and there's much interest from funds to invest in diverse founders and invest in people of color and women, that needle has not really moved forward. And though there are a variety of reasons as to why that needle has not moved forward, there's one that is really keen to us. Thank you for that slide. Like, there's one that's really unique to that we realized we had to do something different when it came to how we as Black Founders Matter were investing and where we saw there was a big gap in investment, right? Let's look at slide number 2. Venture investment, by and large, has used a pretty dated way of evaluating companies. As you can see from the slide, they use benchmarking, right? Now, the problem with benchmarking, as you can see, is that it really is about sameness. It's about incremental change. It's about reputation. All of those come into the factor of how venture uses money and how venture distributes money, right? By this idea of benchmarking. Thank you for that slide. However, the problem with benchmarking is if you don't match up by what already exists, you get left behind. And if you don't look like what already exists, you end up being left behind. This is something that I experienced personally as someone who ran a startup but did not benchmark in the same way that other founders did. And I couldn't get funding. So when we think about like what that problem is and this idea of benchmarking, the question is like, how do we step outside of that? What does that look like, right? How do you redefine what success looks like in venture if you're someone that doesn't benchmark in the same way that white and Asian founders are able to benchmark with each other? So in my research for doing this keynote address, I wanted to see how others had been innovating in their communities when it came to venture, when it came to raising capital. And so that brings me to 3 incredible entrepreneurs that really helped to change and redefine what success looked like in another city. Now we'll get back to Portland and how things work here. I am here in Portland, Oregon. We'll get back to that. But it led me looking at these 3 entrepreneurs. If you'll put up slide 3, we can see them. So now these 3 entrepreneurs are in Miami, a city that's very close to my heart. That's where my mom lives. It's a city I grew up going to as someone that is, first-generation American and of Haitian descent. There's so many Haitian people in Miami, so it's a place that I'm very close to, and it was a really good place to use as a model for talking about the color of money and really getting to this point of like, who changes the color of money, right? So we had 3 amazing entrepreneurs here. Maxine Tuckman, the CEO of Caribou. Now, Caribou is an edtech library, and it's an edtech online library of books and games. And she became one of few Latina founders with a technology-based growth company in Miami, right? Amazing. She's done amazing work. She's continuing to do amazing work. And we're going to get more into what she faced. There's also Felicia Hatcher, the co-founder of Code Fever, or as it was then known. a company offering training camps and hackathons for young people, and transformed a vacant building in a historically Black neighborhood into a co-working space and innovation lab. Amazing. And then there's also Pandwi Gibson, founder of Ecotech Visions, a company that provides services and co-working space to green startups, which is located largely in a Black section of Miami-Dade County. These three amazing entrepreneurs, who happen to be women, faced what could have looked like insurmountable odds when it came to making their ventures come to life. What were some of those odds? For example, thank you for that slide. Maxine Tuckman, being a rare Latina founder and leading a company, was told to move to San Francisco. She even shortened her name. She was told by investors, no one will invest in you if you don't move to San Francisco. Though it was very important to her to start this and create this and build this from her home in Miami, and was told that that's not something that would work. She also shortened her name to just Max to get people to respond to emails and respond to her, respond and so that she could raise money. Now, what's interesting is with Pandwi Gibson, she experienced a lot of financial and real estate bias when it came to raising capital and to realize her venture. Now, Pandwi specifically, has an extensive amount of degrees and comes from a line of Black women in her family that are scientists. However, when it was time for her to launch Ecotech Visions, her education was dismissed. They assumed that she wouldn't have the money to put a down payment on a building. And when she did, they assumed that she had been an adult worker. Now, which still blows my mind. Now, what I want to really highlight is how these founders were able to break through these barriers that were holding them back. Now, Maxine, for example, was able to, because of the hardships that she faced around getting funding, realized that she was going to have to go out and hustle to get this money. So she went on to compete in over 30 pitch competitions across the country, constantly going from city to city to compete. And she placed or won in all of them, which is amazing. She also started a crowdfunding campaign on the platform WeFunder and was the first Latina founder on that platform to raise $1.07 million from 40% women and 35% POC investors. She also, in her early days of bootstrapping, she thought about how to get support from friends and family in a different way. Instead of asking for money, she would ask for favors. She got friends to write articles about her. She had a friend give her working space to use. Very resourceful. In the case of Pandwi, her early funding came from women that existed outside of investment circles that were referred to her through a leadership program, which you would think that her investment would have come from people within the community, but she realized that she was going to have to reach outside of the community to realize her venture. Now, in the case of Felicia Hatcher, in 2015, after launching Code Fever and purchasing that building and starting to change the narrative of what it looked like in the inner city for Black communities and create opportunities for Black youths to learn to become coders, that went off with a huge success. And in 2015, she was able to launch Black Tech Week, an annual event established to connect startup founders and tech professionals and investors, drawing crowds beyond the Black community. It's interesting, that event drew a very large white attendance, and began to showcase all the assets that exist within the Black community. The speakers, venture investors, startup founders, and tech, have at Tech Week, at Black Tech Week, have demonstrated the force of Black entrepreneurship and actually has catalyzed the success for many. These women went above and beyond to ensure not only that they could realize their ventures, but also that they could continue to support their communities and build their companies in non-typical places like Miami. Now, what about when it comes to us here in Portland? I want to give you a little story about my first experience with investing and the first company that we invested in, which is a local company here that you might know about called A Kid's Book About, and it's in a founder named Jelani Memory. Now, Kids Book About is a media company that started publishing books for families to address hard to discuss topics like racism and divorce and belonging and COVID-19. If you'll throw up slide 4. Now, when you see here, the barriers to why many investors would have passed up on A Kid's Book About was they started out publishing books, and that's a highly saturated space, like wildly saturated. But they started out publishing books, and then they also, let me pull that slide up. They also were able to, they also didn't know, like there was no clear assumption for what thank you for that slide. There was also no clear assumption for what the market appetite was for their books. And it wasn't tech, right? So everyone thinks like all the money is going into tech, so you invest in tech. However, they existed outside of those norms. And when we looked at this company, we realized that we had to change the way that we evaluated companies. And what we realized was there was incredible innovation in how that company was run. For a typical publishing company, it took 2 years for, from end to end for a book to be released. And they narrowed that down to 60 days, which is mind-blowing. They also found a way to have a net 30 when it came to the printing of the books, and didn't have to pay for the books until after they had already been purchased and ordered. And so we decided this is a great company and this is someone that we want to invest in. We invested in them. Within 6 months of us making that investment, their monthly recurring revenue grew over 1,000%, and they closed 2020 with blockbuster sales in the millions, which says a lot for how venture, which says a lot for how venture typically looks at companies and values them, as opposed to being able to look outside of the box and realize that a Black entrepreneur is going to think differently, is going to approach solving problems differently, and actually can see ahead of the curve. A Kid's Book About launched in the fall of 2019. And it may not have seemed like there was an obvious appetite for these books and having these conversations. But as we came into 2020 and we saw the social justice movement really take fire, there was such a high demand for what they're creating. And since then, they've gone on to be on Oprah's favorite things list, and have gotten so much media and are creating some really exciting things that, as one of their investors, I can't tell you about, but there's some exciting things that are coming this year from them that we're really excited to be a part of and support. And so I only say that to really explain that, like I said at the beginning, money is defined by people and what they do. So what is the color of your money? Have you taken a chance to really think about that? What does your money say about you? How do you invest? Now, maybe for some of you, you're thinking like, I'm not an accredited investor. That's not, but really our money says a lot. How we spend our money says a lot about what the color of our money is. You know, in the case of Maxine Tuckman, when she did that crowdfunding campaign on WeFunder, you know, check sizes ranged from $500 and upward. So there are all kinds of opportunities when it comes to investing, even if you don't have a net worth of $2 million. And that brings me to a bit of my own personal journey when it comes to investing and how I looked at it. Back in 2018, I announced I was a part of PI, the Portland Incubator Experiment here in Portland, and I announced this fund, the Black Founders Matter Fund. And with a lot of excitement, that was the last time that Paige saw me speak, with a lot of excitement. And one of my, you know, when launching this fund, it was really around creating more opportunities for Black founders to add solutions to our society, because that's what really any company is doing, is they're creating a solution. And when it comes to the color of our money, and when it comes to how we use our money, it's like, are we limiting the solutions that are being provided to our society? It's something that we really should be thinking about. But in my own personal journey with that, we got back in 2020, we got started, we made our first investment, and things have taken off for us. We've been fundraising ever since, but something came up that really was of concern to my business partner and I. As I was preparing for this actual keynote, we looked at our first 5 investments. We are wildly proud of the founders that we've been able to invest in. But we realized all we had invested in was men, which really, really was like a punch in the stomach when I thought about it. Because when I announced the fund back in 2019 at the PI demo day, I had a very keen interest in investing in women and investing in Black women. But here we'd gone through our first 5 investments, and we hadn't done it yet. And it really was time for us to like reassess what our investment strategy was and what we're looking at. And so my business partner and I, Himalaya, who you'll see right after me, we realized that it was important for us to stand with Black women. And so we made a vow to make our next investments specifically in ventures that are led by Black women. And we're so excited. We have 3 that we're about to roll on now. And so I tell you that story, I wanted to say that when it comes to the color of our money, this is not a white versus Black problem or a Latina versus Asian problem. It's something that we all have to reassess. It's something that we all have to think about how we're thoughtfully moving forward when it comes to our investment. That's something that we as Black Founders Matter had to like realign and get focused on what really matters. And that was making sure that not only are we investing in this community, in the Black community, but we're also investing equitably in the Black community. When it comes to the color of money, we all have to change. We all have to do better. And that doing better and that changing is not at the cost of profits. It doesn't have to be at the cost of profits. In the case of A Kid's Book About, we've seen them have astronomical sales, and we've seen them do incredible things. Like, we're very proud of them. But we all have to thoughtfully think about how we're investing, who we're investing in, and how we can shape a future, the future of money that is truly exists in a colorless, equitable way. Thank you so much for having me.